Good evening, everyone. This lecture is on information security. Information security is getting to be very important given the fact that a lot of the resources that governments and organizations are investing in are digital or informational in nature. Um, Companies invest a lot of resources in their digital information and thus needs to protect it. The government also have put laws to protect the privacy of individuals. So organizations need to make sure that information they collect about their customers, in case of like the medical field, about patients, for example, are private and secure. However, when we look at the news every day, we hear about someone breaking into a network, information being stolen from organizations, and also something that has been disturbing in 2013, for example, has been the revelations of Edward Snowden, who was a contractor for the CIA and for the NSA, the National Security Agency, saying that even the government are actually intercepting information about individuals like you and I, and also about foreign governments. We know, of course, we have heard about China trying to break into the White House network and trying to get information about companies in the US and or about government. But we also knew that the US is doing the exact same thing. And I guess we found out that they were trying to access the phone for the German chancellor and so on. So it's really very alarming to see the fact that there is very little security and very little privacy nowadays. Organizations are being hacked, they are being attacked, and we also have government introducing attacks on other governments or individuals. You will hear a lot about system and application security, how organizations can protect their network, how can they protect their information resources, and how can they prevent threats and protect vulnerabilities that are on the network. So one of the ways for like protecting information that is on a private network is to use a firewall. And people may think of the firewall as a hardware. In fact, can be both. Can be just software, or it can be software and hardware, in order to prevent unauthorized access to information. A lot of people may think that's actually preventing people from the outside to access information that is within what we call a network parameter. But it also, the firewall is important really to realize that the firewall also prevent unauthorized dissemination of information from inside of the network. So it may prevent an employee to send a sensitive file, for example, outside of the organization. So it prevents information or unauthorized access from outside, but it also prevents sensitive information from leaving the organization. And this is, again, something that a lot of people may think that the firewalls are just like protection from the outside world, but it is also important to realize that the firewall prevents sensitive information from leaving the boundaries of the network. Okay, we also, in addition to the firewall, we may have an intrusion detection system, which is very, very important, because if an attack is successful and can go through the firewall, we need another layer of protection to tell us that there has been an attack and to detect unauthorized access to information. So the intrusion detection monitors the network and see if there is any violation in accessing a particular resource on the network. The detection also only alarms and alerts the manager. If we add to it an intrusion prevention system, then we are able to also stop the attack from accessing anything that is valuable to us or from accessing resources that are unauthorized. So with an intrusion detection and prevention system, we can alert an attack, and we can also prevent it from doing any malicious attack on any of the resources that are connected to the network. How do they do that? By resetting the connection. So even if they have had access through the firewall, then they are not able to maintain that communication. All of the network connections are dropped and are asked to re-enter again and again, because the IDS and the IPS have already detected that particular attacker, then they would not be allowed to access the network again. We also have what we call private and public keys that also allow or make sure that whoever only information that is intended to a receiver can be opened by only the receiver. So we know that some of the threats that we have with computers is that information that we send across the network and through the public network may be intercepted, which means that someone else other than the intended receiver can intercept that information and can steal that information. To prevent that, we use something called the private and public key, which means that I encrypt the information before I send it, and only the sender has a key to decrypt that information. Thus, even if the information is intercepted on its way to the receiver, no one can make sense of that information because it is encrypted. We have a lot of challenges with security because of the fact that now we have these mobile devices, and we also allow employees and people who are using our network to bring their own device. BYOD is bring your own device. So even if I have protection for devices that are owned by the organization, now people are bringing their phones and their tablets. So the point is, shall I prevent them from accessing the network or not? We also have social networks, and a lot of the employees are actually accessing these social networks, and these may also pose a vulnerability to our network and our electronic resources. We have the public cloud, and with the public cloud, we talked about cloud before. We said organizations can store their resources on servers that are owned by vendors. So they rent a space on a particular server, and they are charged every month based on the capacity or the storage that they consume or they use. However, there is again challenges regarding using the public cloud, and that's why some companies may choose creating their own private cloud. we can see that every year companies have to or are incurring a lot of cost because of cybercrime, because attackers are after their data, and they have, of course, to they have may have litigations against them. So a lot of expenses or losses due to cybercrime. So in 2013, you can see how the different countries, how many million of dollars the different countries have to pay in that particular year because of cybercrime. As you can see, the US has the highest among all of them. And when we look at the attacks, so many different attacks, and I'm not going to go over any one of them because I want the group to be able to talk about these. So we have denial of service, where you are not able to access specific resources because an attacker have overwhelmed the network. So you are not able, the authorized user, can now not have access. We have web-based attacks on, as I said, electronic assets. We have malicious insiders. We have the viruses, the worms, the Trojans, and these are causing disruption to the network, are causing modification to some of the assets, or wipe out of all of your information assets. We also have the problem of devices being stolen or being forgotten in public places. We have phishing, like getting an email that appears to be from your bank asking you to log in when it is actually from an attacker, and all they want is your credentials so that they can access the network. We have the botnets, or what they call the zombies, where these are like infected computers that try to cause malicious activities to other resources on the network, and they are controlled. These infected computers are actually controlled by hackers and attackers. So as I said, the denial of service, you are denied access to either the internet or to a machine, even though you have authorized access to these resources. Those of you who are playing like online games can see some of these effects, where you are not able to access your space, or every time you do something, then it is reset again or eliminated, and that's what gamers try to do in order to win, or to disrupt what they call disgruntled gamers. Most of these attacks are against high-profile web servers like banks and credit card companies. And what the attacker will do is that they overload a particular network so that you no longer have access to the resource. As we said, we had phishing and social engineering. With phishing, you get that email telling you to log on to a particular network because so that they can get your credentials, which is the password and the user ID. And it appears as if it is from your bank or from your school or from the organization that you are working in, when in fact it is an attacker. So the attacker is impersonating a valid organization. The social engineering, in fact, may appear to be trivial, when in fact is not, because you can see from the statistics that you have a very high percentage of data breaches because of social engineering. And with social engineering, that's when a friend would ask another person for their password, and through that, they would say, can you give me your password for, let's say, the SAP system, and you give them their password, and they give you a very valid excuse, but then they go in and they do harm, or may get access to information that they are not intended because they know that you have access to that information. So using your profile or using your credentials will allow them to do that. This is, again, a lot of the company policies prohibit these kind of activities because they understand that it causes a lot of harm, and it would be very hard to prove otherwise. I know now with the biometrics, companies can prove if someone else had impersonated or had used social engineering in order to access the network. Okay, so what's the solution? We know one of the solutions or three of the solutions that we talked about is setting the firewalls to prevent unauthorized access, to have an intrusion detection and intrusion prevention system so that I would detect any attack, and if even an attack occurs and is successful to access the network, that I would prevent it from accessing any of the resources that are valuable for me. And also we talked about encryption, that if I am sending sensitive information across the network, that I would encrypt it using a private key, and then only the intended receiver will have a public key that decrypt the information. But then we also have security intelligence software. This is software that can scan the log that has been created about what kind of packets came into the system, what kind of information left the network, who is accessing it, what kind of behavior are people doing, and analyzing all that information in order to understand how are assets being used, what kind of activities or behavior people are doing, and then analyzing these behavior and identifying ones that are harmful. So you have to understand what is normal, what are normal activities within the network, and then identify ones that abnormal behavior and flag them. So if any time a person log on to a specific server and then commit certain commands or wrote certain commands in a particular sequence in order, for example, to delete all of the data or to copy information and send it, then you can, as soon as these activities happen, a set of activities in sequence happen, you want the software to intelligently identify these as being a threat and to stop it and drop that particular connection, whoever is trying to do these malicious acts. As for application security, I want you to watch that video and make sure that you listen to everything that I've talked about. Remember that security is very, very important, and organizations really are trying to protect confidentiality because of regulations, government regulations. They want to make sure that resources are accessible to valid users, to authorized users, and they want to maintain the integrity of the data, which means that data is not changed by someone or is deleted, for example, and are no longer accessible. So security is very important to protect, as we said, the privacy and the confidentiality of the data. It's also important in order to maintain the integrity and to make sure that the resources remain accessible. That would be all for this video. I hope you have learned a bit about security. I'll also review the recording from the group, and if they provide valuable information, then I will make it accessible to you guys. Thank you for listening.